terrific movie.
Thank you.
Very tense. There are some moments where it was just like, my nails were about to drive right into my hands because it's.
I wonder whether is it such a thing as a movie that's too tense? Can you be too tense?
I guess
maybe
some
you
movies,
can be.
Yeah, some movies. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Requiem for a Dream, or this is Severing movies. They kind of hit their peak early on with Run Silent, Run Deep, or Dust Boot.
That's one of my favorite. Run Silent, Run Deep. It's a little bit of an influence on this. I think a lot of some movies have some. There's only so many kind of moves you can make.
Right.
In that limited environment, and there's always the same permutation. The same few moves are made. I think in most some movies. Obviously, the big difference with this one is that it's a kind of treasure hunt movie, I suppose, for lack of a better word. And it's not naval. And I think that almost every other sub-movie, or maybe every other sub-movie that I can think of, is like a naval story set in the Cold War, set in the Second World War, or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I keep thinking of Dust Boot, which is kind of the ultimate.
Well, that's the kind of the grandfather of all sub movies. That's such a great movie, and because that took such a naturalistic kind of approach, and that's something we looked at all those films and stole little ideas from a lot of them.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this one is that it kind of combines both the claustrophobia of being aboard a submarine where death is always around the corner with sort of like a psychological thriller in that, these groups of people, they need to work with each other to make this heist happen.
Yeah.
But, as time goes on, greed starts to overpower the mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in that way, that was sort of, I guess, we were thinking of Treasure of the Sierra Madre at that moment. And also just thinking that it's an interesting thing to look at the moment, I think, because these characters are all people who feel themselves to be thrown on the scrap heap of life. They've got these skills, they've learned manual skills, blue-collar skills, but somehow nobody wants that anymore. They're not considered to have any worth, these people. So they're trying to get their worth back, and they just do it in a way that's not very clever, which is, they want to try and get rich. They try and do this heist, and so yeah, you do wonder, I think, from the beginning, oh my God, they've bitten off more than they can chew. Are they going to get out of here?
Right. Yeah, and I think also it's interesting that you sort of said against the background these guys are they're out of work.
Yeah.
Which is very prevalent around the world. People keep losing their jobs, so it's sort of.
And there's a kind of hatred to the bankers, towards the bankers in these characters, which is also very much of the moment. This idea that they feel that the life that they were brought up in, where those sort of blue-collar workers had respect and their skills were acknowledged, has been destroyed by the bankers or by the people who make the financial decisions, and so they're filled with resentment, they're filled with rage. Absolutely. As people probably should be.
Yeah, you can't blame them. Regardless of the danger they're putting themselves in, you can't blame them for wanting to take on the mission, because everybody wants to get paid, everyone wants to make a living. And sometimes you're pushed to an area where you don't have a choice. You gotta you do what you can to survive, and that becomes the instinct to survive. Is really what powers people to do certain things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then no, I know a lot of this was done. You shot a lot on the submarine and also on a set, which was. I imagine they both had their challenges, right?
Well, I think filming on the real submarine was kind of a decision that was a slightly crazy decision, because we found this real Russian sub from the 60s and thought, well, this is so beautiful as a piece of a period design, Soviet design from 1964. Everything in it is still operational, still functioning, and you think, wow, you could never build anything like that. It would just cost millions and millions and millions of dollars to do it. So we said, let's take the plunge, so to speak, and film on the real sub. And we did that for a couple of weeks. It was hard because you've got one way in and out, up a ladder, and get everybody in or out. It takes a long time. You can't really have anybody down there except the absolute tiny shooting crew. And of course, a lot of scenes in this movie have got 8-10 actors in them at the same time, and so it becomes hard just to even find a place for them to be, so you can see people, because a submarine is really just long corridor. So yeah, that was difficult, but I think we got a lot of value from the feel of the real set, and the actors also inhabited the parts much more because they'd been in a real set. They knew how claustrophobic it was. They knew they had the smell of diesel in their nostrils, and they'd figured out how to throw themselves through the hatches and all those things that you have to do as a sailor, and so when we went to the studio and we shot on the set for the rest of the movie, I think they brought the knowledge and the sort of physical memory of what it's like on the real sub with them. But the hardest part of filming was actually we did a big underwater sequence in the middle of this big action sequence underwater, and that was tough. I've never done much underwater filming, and trying to do something which was quite complex in terms of its choreography and in terms of understanding that you're in this big ocean, really, but you're actually in a tank that's only twice the size of this room or whatever. How do you make that work? Right. How murky do you want the water to be so that, if it's too murky you can't see anything. If it's not murky enough you see the sides of the tank and you have to CGI out everything, and it becomes very difficult. So that was the hardest part, doing that big action scene.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the submarine itself is a real character in this film because it has history written all over it.
Yeah. It's so textured, isn't it? It's a great character. I think that as in any film about a vessel, so whether it be Run Silent, Run Deep, the submarine movies, or whether it's Master and Commander, the boat becomes a symbol of everyone's survival. Without that thing, you're all going to go. You're all dead. So you kind of you love it.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I was reading through the notes. One of the people you worked with on this film wanted to give it more of a science fiction feel. The look of the sub, which was interesting because it's like most other movies, like Hunt for Red October or Crimson Tide. A lot of the subs look so pristine.
Yeah, exactly, and that's when it's a naval film. They do it all to be high tech and sort of green glowing lights everywhere and computer screens and all that. This is much more kind of it's Cold War era. It's kind of everything's mechanical and it's big metal levers and old-fashioned kind of analog technology. And I guess that's another way of looking at the movie, is that these characters are analog characters in a digital age. I mean, I suppose that's a good way of looking. But when I think what he meant by saying we wanted to give it a kind of a sci-fi feel is that it's the sci-fi of Alien. It's that kind of broken down intergalactic truckers kind of rough kind of feel, which I guess also, if you look at James Cameron's The Abyss, there's a little bit of that in there. These are working people and they're kind of tough, no nonsense types. So yeah, there's a little bit of it's more Ridley Scott than Tony Scott. It's more Alien than it is Crimson Tide.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because those movies you mentioned, Alien and The Abyss, the characters are very down to earth.
Yes.
And that's the case here with a lot of actors. They like Jude Law and Ben Mendelsohn, among others. They really bring these characters down to earth in a way that feels fresh and really locks you into the action.
Yeah. Well, I think in some ways this kind of movie, people would say it's kind of an old-fashioned movie, but to me, old-fashioned is good because I take the old-fashioned to mean it's kind of based on characters and on real situations that have a plausibility to them, and the tension comes out of the reality.
Absolutely, yeah. And Jude Law is one of the most handsome-looking actors on the planet. You managed to make him look very down to very rough and tumble. Was
kind
that hard?
Grungy.
Very grungy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Grungy. Yeah. Was that hard to do, or?
No. I went to see Jude initially. One of the reasons I went to see him because I'd seen him in a play where he played a sailor, the Eugene O'Neill play, and it was on in London about 3 or 4 years ago. And he'd put on some weight for that, and I thought, wow, there's a real physicality about it. It's not what you normally expect. Jude Law's the opposite of a kind of working class blue collar guy, I think, in most of his parts. And I went to see him, and he was so enthusiastic about the script and about the part and about transforming himself. And that's what he did. He spent months changing the physique, building up big muscles on his forearms so he looked like Popeye, some sailory kind of things, shaving his head, aging himself up, learning this very complex accent, which is an Aberdeen accent, which is a very specific Scottish accent. And turning himself into a sort of a blue collar, inarticulate blue collar kind of guy.
Right.
And I think it gives a great performance. I think it's a total transformation, and it's just a demonstration, I guess, of what a great actor he is. And sometimes you forget with movie stars that actually they're great actors. You know, you're used to seeing Jude in a romantic comedy where they're looking so beautiful, but you know, when he kind of puts that to one side and sort of turns himself into a character, he's really quite something, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it definitely shows here. I mean, and seeing the actors here, I mean, did it take long for them to find their way around the submarine?
Well, we had a few sessions. We had like a week of rehearsal, and where we had a couple of submarine advisors, guys who'd been on subs for 20 years or whatever, and one guy who worked in the submarine museum, which there is in the south of England, and they came and gave lessons in basics of this is how a submarine works. And if you're the navigator, this is your job, and go away and do these tasks, and that's you know, so we can see you reading the charts and what you would do, and then you know that you're the guy who operates the planes that make the sub go up or down, and this is what you would do. So they all kind of learned their jobs, and I think that was sort of key, so that when they actually got on set, they felt they knew exactly what they were meant to be doing at every moment. And one of the joys of making this movie was that I got to cast just great character actors. I didn't have the pressure of, you've got to have another movie star. We were just able to cast the people who were right and who brought the right kind of flavor to it. And so, I'm really, I think across the board, they're just wonderful characters.
That's a good point, because I mean, aside from Jude Law, most of these guys are just character actors, and which is great. And they think, I mean, Ben Mendelsohn especially, because he's done a lot of work. He was in another movie this year called Startup, which
it was a very good movie.
It was a very good movie. He was phenomenal in that. And I mean, do you find in most movies that producers really want to get a lot of stars involved?
Well, I think it becomes it's all to do with budget, isn't it? If it's the bigger the budget, the more stars, because stars are the thing that get people to go to the cinema, and we can be annoyed by that, or we can embrace it. And I think with this movie, we were lucky enough to, we were able to make it for a budget where, just with the story and the nature of the story, and with Jude's name, we were able to put it together and make it, in a kind of, not huge budget way, but in enough, have enough money to make a good movie. And I think that's for me the ideal, is that you don't have to compromise too much. You don't have to. If I'd done it for more money, I would have had to probably reset it in America, and I would have had to have two big American stars and probably a love interest and all this.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem. The bigger the budget, the more you have to conform to the conventional. And I didn't want to be conventional. Right.
Yeah. No, I think that's the great thing about this movie, is it's not conventional.
Yeah.
There's way too many conventional movies out there, and the sub that you're on is an actual sub from the Cold War.
Yeah, absolutely.
And was filming aboard. I mean, not so much, but getting permission to use it, was that a challenge?
No, I mean, what was a challenge? Not getting permission to use it, because it belongs to this collector now, this submarine. He brought it over from Russia in the early 90s when they were selling off everything, all the state assets. But what was tricky was we wanted to. Part of the film is set in the Crimea, and obviously the Crimea, subsequent to this film being made, is no longer part of Ukraine. It's now part of Russia, because the Russians invaded, 6 months ago, just when we were in post-production. So we were meant to be going to Russia, to Sevastopol, where they're meant to get the sub, and film on a real submarine there, because the Ukrainian Navy still had at that time a sub of this vintage that they were using, and we were going to take it underwater and stuff. In the end, we had to do CG for those shots. But history overtook us. We couldn't get insurance to go. Universal wouldn't give us the insurance. So we ended up using the bits of footage that are shot in the Crimea during just an arrival sequence when they arrived there. I actually shot with the DP. We went on a recce just to have a look at the place, and we shot some research footage, and that we ended up having to use that in the film, because couldn't go back. So the shots of the Russian fleet there and things like that, those are all shots we took when we were on a research trip.
Right. Great. And what's up next for you?
I don't know really. I've got various things. I'm doing a little documentary. I'm developing a couple of things. I've got a couple of things here. I've got a movie about the young Elvis Presley that I'm trying to get together, getting the script right on. I've got a movie about the about Mexican drug cartel. So I've got I'm juggling a few different things. It's always hard to wait till the script's ready until it's good, and then finding an actor. So it's having a couple of different things in play at any one time is sort of healthy. I think if you just have one, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, but do you still find yourself drawn more to documentaries or more to feature films?
I like to combine both. I really do. I kind of have a rule with myself that after I do a fiction film, I'll go off and do a documentary, just because it's a way of clearing your head and not getting too obsessed by the business, which is why everyone in movies talks about the whole time, and trying to get a bit of perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I liked a lot, and I liked How I Live Now.
Oh, thank you.
Both were really good movies, so yeah, cool. I look forward to what you have to do next.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.